Hey, what's up guys? In this video, we are going to discuss using 1031 exchanges and entities and putting those things together. All right, let's get started. So I received a few questions about 1031 exchanges and how they work with business entities, and it's not unusual. This is a very common question that comes up with real estate investors who have owned an asset, an investment asset, for more than a year. And basically, for a 1031 exchange, if you're not familiar with it, what it means is that you can take an asset and you can roll the gain, and actually everything needs to roll, into a replacement property, another investment property, and you won't have to pay any taxes on it currently. For example, if I bought a house here and I bought this house for $200,000 and it's now increased in value and it's worth $450,000. Well, if I sold that house and I just took the money personally, then I would have gain of $250K that I would have to pay taxes on. And so if I want to avoid paying tax on that, because if you take away taxes on this deal right here, after you sell the property with $250,000 in gain at 20%, you're going to lose $50K. So that's going to leave you with $200,000 plus the original basis of $200K. You'll have $400K left to invest with. Whereas if you engage in a 1031 exchange, what you could do is take this property here, set up an exchange accommodator, a qualified intermediary who will handle it, and it allows you to sell it. Funds are collected here, the $450K, and as long as you don't touch it, you don't have to pay tax on it. You go out and you find a replacement property that you want to invest into that's $450K or more, and you roll those funds into that replacement property. And so what you're able to do now is, by avoid paying tax, you get to keep that $50K to put into another investment. Now, what you have to understand is that with these numbers that I just drew out for you, in order for this to work the way I described, you got to roll everything in. And what trips people up sometimes is debt. They don't appreciate the fact that if I had $200,000 debt on this house, I got to make sure that I've got $200,000 debt over here. I have to, roll the equivalent in. So you have to be going in for equal or more value on that replacement property. So that's the basics of a 1031 exchange. And there's some nuances and details about timing and all that. I'm not going to go into those details. There's plenty of people that have covered those, and you can find it just by looking up 1031 exchange. What I wanted to address is using entities with a 1031 exchange, because this creates a ton of confusion. I mean, what people would many times like to do is they realize, hey, I've got this property in my own name, wrong way to hold it. It should have been in a limited liability company. So I want to go from my name, and then when I acquire the replacement property over here, I want to have that replacement property owned in a limited liability company. So I'm going to take title over here. Or possibly on the flip side, you started with the property in an LLC here. And when you do the exchange, you want to end up in a different LLC, LLC number 2, over here with your replacement property. So these are the types of questions that come up quite a bit when we're dealing with 1031 exchanges, and how can we put something together that will allow us to accomplish this? Well, here's the basic rule. The basic rule is that on a 1031 exchange, you have a down leg and an up leg. Down leg, sell, up leg is when you buy. So when you're coming down here and you're putting this together, the person who sells the property, they'll tell you, needs to be on title for the replacement asset. So if you sold it in your own name, then you need to acquire the property in your own name. Okay, so you got to buy it in your own name. And then the general rule from that is, if you acquire it in your own name, you should let it season for at least a year before you look at transferring it. Well, the thing about the 1031 exchange that I think that some people miss is that the intent of the law is to allow you to roll your gains into replacement property, but they don't want to do it where you're going to gain some additional tax advantage. So that's the concern when this provision was put together. They wanted to prevent abuses. So if I had a piece of property that was in my name and I want to roll into an LLC, you should talk to your qualified intermediary about doing this, closing in the LLC on the replacement property. But what's key here is how that asset's going to hit your tax return, meaning this. In many of the structures that I've shown you, I talk about the benefits of using a Wyoming holding company, LLC, and treating it as a partnership. So you got this LLC treated as a partnership for tax purposes. And the reason why we're doing that is that we want that K1, so we look a little better to lenders when we're going in to apply for a loan because of where that property hits our return. Well, if this property was originally in my name, and I roll into an LLC structure that's owned like this by a Wyoming LLC down here, that's treated as a partnership, it's going to create a problem for me because when the IRS looks at it, they'll say, hey, this was on Schedule E, page 1 in the last tax year, and then the new tax year, it shows up through this entity on a K1. That can cause a problem. But if you set up the new entity, and you have this new entity set up as a disregarded entity, then it's going to show up at the same spot on your 1040. So it's not going to create the red flags. And so if it's disregarded, then you're going to be able to pick up on the exchange that same benefit or having that asset protection. So if you own it in your own name, what you could look at doing is rolling into a disregarded LLC. Again, you'd be the same owner. Now, where this could run afoul is let's assume that you and your wife or you and your spouse are in a non-community property state. That could be a problem for you to do it this way with an LLC because it may have to be treated as a partnership. So if you don't do an LLC, then what you could do instead is a land trust. You could roll into a land trust. So if you own the property directly and you're doing a 1031, consider using a land trust or disregarded LLC to take title on the other end of that exchange. Now, with entities can also engage in 1031 exchanges. It is not limited to individuals, as I was just drawing out here. So if you had a property in a limited liability company right here, and I want to engage into an exchange, a 1031 exchange with this property, it's fine. You can do that. In fact, if it was set up like this, where that's held down here through my Wyoming LLC, like we've talked about, so you got your Wyoming structure already in place, and it's time to do your 1031, you can easily do this. You'll sell the property here. You'll bring in your QI, who's going to hold the funds, so you get rid of your property. Then when you find the replacement property, you'll take title in this same limited liability company on the replacement property, just like that. So you've just did a 1031 through a limited liability company. Okay. But here's where sometimes this can run into issues for you. When I did this deal, if you have any debt on the property, okay, this is what I tell people all the time. If you have debt, right, on this property and you want to engage in a 1031 exchange, then when you buy that new property, because you need to roll your debt into that new deal, that means you have to go out and get new financing for that new property. If this isn't a commercial property, multifamily, 5 units or more, then you're not going to be able to qualify unless you find a community lender, a portfolio lender that's willing to do the deal for you. So if you're thinking you're going to use conventional financing, Freddie Fannie conforming note, you got a problem. So I've worked with individuals who get right up to this point. They've already sold the property in the name of the LLC. They're trying to close on the new property. They're trying to get a loan in this company, and the lenders say, we won't do it. What happens to their exchange? It blows up on them. So here's what you need to do. If you're in that scenario, then what you're going to have to do is pull this property out. Get it out into your name in advance of all of this. Do a drop. Pull the property out. So then when you go through the financing on that replacement property, you're able to clean it up. And I would say pull it out a good 6 months in advance before you go through this. So if you know the property's held like this, and you know financing is going to be a concern for you, if you haven't set up that community lender, then you're going to probably have to drop it out. Now, this isn't unusual. There's many situations where you'll engage in a structure like this. It's called a drop and swap. For example, if I had a limited liability company set up here and there were 2 members involved. So let's say it's a joint venture between this party and this party. And this one owns 70% and this investor owns 30%. Well, if we have a property in here that we intend to sell, the issue that comes up is that unless both partners want to engage in a 1031 exchange, you're screwed. Because when you do a 1031 exchange out of this LLC, all of the gain, so if the gain on this deal, let's say it was, say $1 million, easy enough, $1 million, then this individual has to say, yeah, I'm going to put my portion, $300,000, into replacement property. You can't say, all right, we're going to cut off $1 million, distribute $300,000 to this partner because this partner wants to take their profits and go out and buy a vacation rental. And I'm going to take my $700,000 and go buy another multifamily unit. You can't do that. It's both, the entity itself has to do it all or nothing. So here's what you have to do then in that scenario. You engage in what's called a drop and swap. So before you enter into the exchange and put your property under contract, you'll deed it out to the individual owners as tenants in common. So this investor will own 70%, this investor will own 30%. Now, when I'm drawing this out here, I mean, these could be business entities, it doesn't have to be individuals, but you just drop it down to the owners and get it here like this. And then when you sell it in this TIC arrangement, tenant in common arrangement, this investor can do whatever they want with their 30%. This investor can take their 70% and do whatever they want with it. So if they want to do a 1031, they're able to do a 1031 exchange on that. And then you can go back to those things I was talking about, rolling into another business entity that is set up. Maybe it's a disregarded entity or a land trust to put that deal together and then to go about finalizing your asset protection. So 1031s can get complicated. The thing about it that I think you should realize or pay attention to is it takes some planning. And if you think that you may be engaging in one, it's best to set up a strategy session with someone who understands 1031 exchanges to look at your options so that you have the time to do all of this. In my experience, what happens is that I get contacted by people who are already at the stage where they've sold this property and they have a QI involved and they're looking for help. Many times I can't provide the service because it's too late. So be proactive. If you're thinking about doing a 1031 exchange, definitely want to talk to someone who understands them and look at some of the options you have on either the front side or the back side of that transaction. All right, guys, hey, if you like the channel, leave me some likes on this video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Got any questions, drop them in there. You know I like to respond. Take care, everyone.